listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
I'm interested in doing some work for the library. Are you the person to speak to?
Yes. Right. Well, what sort of work are you interested in?
Well, I've just come to live here in Australia. I don't want a full-time job until my children have settled down, but I really need to get out of the house a bit. And I heard you need voluntary workers for various projects.
Right.
But I don't know if I have the right skills.
Well, we do provide training.
Oh!
We always include an orientation to the library, together with emergency procedures. That's fire regulations, emergency exits, first aid so you can cope with accidents or sudden illness. Things like that which are necessary for anyone who's working with the public. Then we give specialist training for particular projects, like using our database system.
I do have quite good computer skills, in fact.
Oh, great.
Is there any sort of dress requirement?
Well, all staff have to wear a name badge, so they can be identified if they go outside the staff-only areas. But apart from that, there aren't many regulations. We ask you to sign in and sign out for insurance purposes, but that's all. How about transport? Do you live locally?
Well, not too far away. I'm at Porpoise Beach. My husband needs a car during the day, but it's only about 20 minutes on the bus.
In fact, we can reimburse part of your travel expenses in that case.
Oh! Would that be the same if I came by car?
No, because parking is such a problem here. One thing we are looking for, though, is someone who can drive a minibus.
No problem. So, do the projects involve going outside the library?
Some, yes, but not all. We've just finished one which involved working with photographs taken of the area 50 or 100 years ago. It basically involved what we call encapsulation.
Putting them in some sort of covers to keep them safe?
Exactly. It's time-consuming work, and we were very grateful to have help with it. Then, sometime next year, we're hoping to begin working on an initiative involving the sorting and labelling of objects relating to local history. We'll be needing help with the cataloguing.
Well, I'd definitely be interested. How about at present?
Well, we have a small team who work to support those who are unable to read.
Working with the blind?
Yes, or other groups who have reading difficulties. We provide volunteers with equipment so that they can take books home with them and read them aloud onto CDs. We're gradually building up a collection that can be lent to those who need them.
I can see it would be useful, but I'd really like to do some sort of work where I can get the chance to meet people. How about reading stories to children?
That's done by our regular staff. But we do have another project. It's a very long-established scheme which involves helping those who are unable to have direct access to the library.
Oh, I noticed someone with a trolley of books when I was at the hospital last week. That sort of thing.
That would have been one of ours, yes. It's one of our most popular services. Lots of people who wouldn't dream of going to the library normally when they're at home borrow a book when the trolley comes round the ward.
I can imagine. Yes, I'd definitely be interested in that. Right, so how do I enrol?
Well, we do ask all volunteers to commit themselves to a regular period each week.
I could probably do 5 or 6 hours.
Oh, be careful not to take on too much. But we do need someone for a couple of afternoons from 2 to 4, so 4 hours altogether.
That sounds fine.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Right, so here's the application form. It asks the usual questions, name and address and telephone number. You also need to fill in details of who we should get in touch with in case of any accident or problem like that. We do need to have that filled in. And there's a space for date of birth, but that's only if you're over 75, so we won't worry about that.
No. Oh, it asks for qualifications. Do I need to provide certificates?
They're not necessary. We'll need the names of 2 referees, not relatives or family members, obviously. What else? Signature of parent or guardian. That won't be necessary, as I assume you're over 18.
Yes. What's this? It says civil conviction check.
That's a document we have to provide by law for those working on projects involving children, so we won't need it in your case. But you will need to sign this separate document. That's a copy of commitment. It's basically an agreement to work according to the library guidelines. So, if you'd like to fill this all in, you can do it here or take it home, whichever you prefer.
I'll take it home if that's okay. Right, well, thank you for your time.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a telephone conversation about a job vacancy.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello, Top Job Employment Agency. Ellen Sykes speaking. How can I help you?
Good morning. My name's Steve Collins and I'm calling about the call centre job advertised in today's paper.
For an operative handling credit card inquiries?
Yes, that's right. The wages and working conditions are all in the ad, so what I'd like to know now is what the work actually consists of. I should explain that I'm a student looking for a summer job, not long-term employment.
That's okay. The people at Intercard say they've always found students to be honest, which of course is essential in this line of work, and they have the basic IT skills needed there. Apparently, there have been a few who didn't find it easy to get there on time in the morning, but in most cases their punctuality is as good as anybody else's. Anyway, about the work. And I know a bit about this because, as it happens, I've worked there myself.
Really?
Yes, for about a year. You'd find that most callers would be people wanting to check the balance on their cards, query payments made and so on.
And from those who've had their card stolen?
No, they ring another number for that, an emergency line. People also call that number if they lose their cards.
And what are most callers like? I mean, what kind of people are they?
All sorts, really. All ages, every kind of background. Though one definite trend is the change in the number of women. Nowadays, they make up around 55% of the total, whereas years ago, there used to be a majority of men calling. At one time, I heard, as many as 3/4 of all credit cards were actually held by men, but that must have been long before I was there.
It's certainly different now. So to do this job, what sort of experience do I need?
None, really. Have you got a credit card yourself?
Yes, I have.
Then you probably know quite a bit about them already. And as a student, you're obviously intelligent, which of course you need to be for the job. So after a day or so working with an experienced operative, I'm sure you'll have picked up enough to deal with routine inquiries, which of course most of them are.
But there are bound to be questions I can't deal with, at least at first. What happens then?
In that case, you can ask a supervisor. They're very helpful to new staff.
I think I like the sound of this. What do I do next?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Can you get over there for 9:45 on Monday morning for an interview?
Definitely, yes. Whereabouts are they?
In Riverside Business Park. Do you know it?
Yes, I've been there once.
How do you usually travel?
By bus.
Right. So you take either the 136 or 137 to the bus station, and when you come out of there, you turn right.
Along Orchard Road, that is. The road from the railway station?
Yes, that's right. You go past the petrol station next to the car dealers, then carry on down the road.
Do I take the first left at the main car park?
Well, you could do that and walk up Newfield Avenue alongside the shopping centre, but it's a long way round. I'd suggest continuing along Orchard Road with the water company and then the insurance offices on your right. They used to be local government offices, by the way.
Yes, I remember those.
And you keep going until you reach the advertising agency. Now, facing that is a small road called Cherry Lane. There's a newspaper office on the corner, and opposite that is a big hotel, so you can't miss it.
And how far down that road is it?
Well, they aren't actually in Cherry Lane. You walk as far as the next junction and turn right into Almond Drive at the mail centre. Intercard is in the third building on the right, between the airline offices and the shipping company.
Fine. I'll be there on Monday. Thanks very much. Bye.
Good luck. Bye.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear two business studies students discussing a presentation they'll do on an article on working effectively in groups. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 26.
So, Brad, what did you think of the article on group work?
Oh, hi, Helen. Yeah, it was pretty good, with helpful pieces of advice on how to make group work effective.
I think we were lucky to be given such a straightforward text to present at the management skills seminar.
Yeah. Actually, shall we discuss it now? Have you got time?
Sure. It's only a 10-minute presentation, so we just need to explain and then give our views on the main points raised in the article.
I'll jot down some notes. Right.
So, there are 3 main sections. I suggest we start with listening.
Yeah, effective listening in groups, because it's not something that's frequently covered on courses in our field.
No, and we should say that in the presentation.
Yeah. And also effective listening's pretty simple, you know. I don't think it's hard to learn.
Well, people think it's easy, but in my experience, most of us tend to be very lazy listeners.
Okay, I wouldn't argue with that.
Something I do think we should emphasize is the power of the listener's posture, gestures, etc., in making speakers feel respected.
Not that you're just waiting for them to finish before jumping in with your own ideas.
Uh-huh.
Okay, right. The next section is on goal setting. Let's make sure we're clear what the article says on this.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it says that all group members must be given time to explain their own goals.
That's it, yeah.
And then did it say that the whole group should agree on common goals?
That's a bit too strong. It's more that everyone's agendas should be equally acceptable. But it does say that goals have to be realistic,
Achievable within a particular time?
You've got it. That's really what the article's saying. There isn't really any point in having ideals if group members know they won't come to anything within a reasonable period. So, I think a summary covering those points will be enough for that part of the presentation, don't you?
Yeah. Now, the last section is about conflict resolution.
Actually, I thought it was the worst part of the article.
Me too.
I don't think it went into sufficient detail on the issue.
Actually, I thought it devoted too much space to it, but that it was all rather boring,
It didn't mention some of the more radical theories.
Absolutely. I found that really irritating.
Right, and also I think it could have said more about conflict sometimes being healthy in groups.
Absolutely. It just mentioned rather glibly about how we should avoid thinking of winners and losers, and that quick resolution of conflict is always desirable.
Without explaining what these terms mean?
Well, it gives quite detailed definitions, but doesn't develop a proper argument.
Right. So, for the presentation, I think we just give some definitions and
then explain what we felt were the weaknesses in the article's treatment of conflict resolution.
Yeah, good.
Now you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, let's think about what we have to prepare for the actual presentation.
Well, I suppose we'll use PowerPoint, but I'm hopeless at using it, especially if it has any visuals. I really have to look into doing a course on it because I know I'll need it in the future.
Don't worry, I'm quite happy using PowerPoint and I'll put it together when everything else is ready.
That's a relief. But yes, do that later.
Okay. Now, I heard the tutor saying we have to include some well-chosen quotations from the article.
I'm not sure if we do. I'll email him to find out.
No need. I can just have a look at the specs he gave us when he set the task.
That'll be quicker.
But the tutor definitely said we have to prepare a handout to go with the talk. I'm not really sure how we do that.
Sarah did one last year.
Who's she?
She's doing the same option as me on marketing. I'll ask her advice on what to include.
Great. So that just leaves the bibliography at the end. I suppose it'll mainly be articles.
Yeah. So we'll just look on the web, and we can leave that till later.
But we've been advised against that?
Well, we could have a look through some journals in the library.
I think we should start by looking through module handbooks. I think that'll give us some good leads.
Yeah, you're probably right. So that's all the topics.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
Listen to the last part of the lecture. As you listen, complete the notes below.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Last time I said that a lot of Irish people left the country and went to England, America and many other foreign countries. Today I'd like to talk about the emigration. The effects of immigration were not all bad. The immigrants experienced a lot of hardship in their new countries. There is a famous story about a park in Shanghai where Chinese and dogs were not allowed. Well, in England, until into the 1950s, signs for jobs sometimes read, "Irish need not apply." The immigrants often experienced discrimination, but they formed many organisations to look after their fellow immigrants. Many of these organisations later became very important. In America, the Irish chose politics as the way forward, and significant cities were controlled by Irish politicians. This movement reached its peak with the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960. His grandparents came from Ireland, and his election had a significant impact in Ireland, helping the process of recovery of self-confidence, which we have today. Today, there are 70 million people of Irish descent living outside Ireland. In America alone, there are 40 million people, and 10 million of these people have a 100% Irish background. They carried the culture of their home country with them and adapted it to their new home. They made changes which would be unthinkable in the home country, and we often laughed at the Yankees' Irishness. In fact, any immigrant who came back to live in Ireland, often after many years, found it very difficult to fit into Irish society again. They had been changed by the experience. These immigrants have always had an interest in the old country. The American letter was a letter containing dollars sent back to one's family. More recently, President Clinton has been very influential in bringing peace to the north of Ireland. Riverdance itself was the idea of a dancer who was American, who applied American methods to traditional dancing, and the fusion was immediately popular. Modern Ireland has been able to use the disaster of the last century to learn modern marketing techniques and apply them, without at the same time losing what is distinctive about itself. Riverdance is a demonstration of that distinctiveness.
That is the end of Part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.